Hey guys, it's Buddha Gem, and I'm going to jump into a little debate with it's a Liberty server who's an anarcho-capitalist, and MCC 1789, who's a fellow libertarian socialist, anarchist, I believe. Um, so let me jump in. The old shtick about the private state and property, and I've done this a few trillion times now. So I thought I would, it'd give me something to put on the channel here. I know I've been neglecting the channel, been super busy. Sorry, guys. Let me try to adjust this a little bit. Okay. Um, First, Liberty Server kind of pokes fun at the idea of a private state. He says a state is a public thing as opposed to a private thing. That's the nature of a state. It's like talking about the tall shortness or intelligent stupidity. No, actually, that's not true, Liberty Server. As Max Weber, the German sociologist, pointed out, the state's essential trait, its irreducible feature, is that it has a monopoly over the legitimate use of force and violence over a given area. That is its irreducible trait. Now, it's not a thing about private and public. It's about who gets to do the killing. Who gets to utilize force and violence over that given area. That's the essential trait. And in that sense, very much when we talk about these private defense agencies, and look, this isn't new. Blackwater's not new. We had the Pinkertons. We've had private defense forces for a very long time. They are essentially states. When they are given monopoly of force and violence over a given area, that's a state. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's public or private. He goes on to say, well, socialists have used the state, capitalists have used the state, but let's work instead towards a stateless community. Sounds good, but is it true? While it is true that socialists have used the state, let's pause for a minute because it's a certain type of socialist. Socialism is a big area, right? A big spectrum. There are authoritarian socialists and there are libertarian socialists, which I count myself as. Libertarian socialists have avoided using the state, as Mikhail Bakunin, pointed out most eloquently, probably, and he warned of the dangers of the red bureaucracy, which would prove to be the most vile and terrible lie that our century has created. A warning about what would happen when these, authoritarian-minded socialists took the reins of the state, and he was correct. And there are libertarian socialists who, from day one have avoided utilizing the state in that fashion. So it's not true that, all socialists have done this. There's a particular strand of socialism, and one that I don't, and many socialists don't agree with. Capitalists, on the other hand, have a much different relationship with the state. And I should point out that there are no socialists that created a state. Socialists did not create a state to, bring in this utopian socialist dream. As wrong as they may have been, the state already existed, and they figured, hey, we'll utilize that power to implement these ideas. We can argue about that some other time. I have plenty of problems with that. But they didn't create a state. And it's important to realize why states developed. And I'm going to say this again and again. I quote these people at length because it matters. When I tell you that James Madison at the Constitutional Convention told his fellow delegates that the primary purpose of this government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority, this isn't some guy sitting around just talking with his buddies. This is a guy who was creating a state out of pure cloth, and for a particular reason. Not to implement some socialist dream, but to protect his class privilege and protect the minority of the opulent from the majority, as he said. John Locke in 1689, the great and chief end of men uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. Adam Smith in 1776, the necessity of civil government grows with the acquisition of valuable property. Till there be property, there can be no government, the very end of which is to secure wealth and defend the rich from the poor. J. Edgar Hoover, later. The function of law, and by this, of course, he means state power, is order, not justice. Justice is only an incidental. There is a reason for these things. The state is the final mechanism of control. And the state has two basic purposes. The primary function is social and class control, to protect the haves from the have-nots, to maintain the security of those who accumulate wealth from the labor of others, to protect wealth from the poverty that wealth creates, and wealth does create poverty. Poverty is not a historic condition. To make sure that there is no reversal from the continual upward distribution of earnings and income from the people who work for wages and salaries to the people who live off dividends, interest, land and mineral royalties, and rent, and to safeguard against any fundamental reform or revolutionary reversal in regards to which class controls the land, the labor, the markets, and the natural resources in this country and the world. That's what the state's about. Public, private, it's about control. It's maintaining class privilege, okay? So these quotes are important. You can go back. It's very simple to understand. I mean, when you talk about, state, socialist and listen, once you have more stuff than you could possibly ever use, right? Once you own 10 million, I think the Queen of England, she's like the largest private landowner. It's some ridiculous amount of land. Once you own that much land, how on earth are you going to defend it? You ask, oh, can I defend my land? I want to see you defend 10 million acres of land. Yeah, okay. I mean, one person would have trouble defending a handful of acres of land. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's why the state is needed. I mean, you can see this. I mean, you go back, read the Bible. King David starts out as basically like this thug who goes around and helps protect large landowners' property. Why? Because they can't protect it on their own, because they own more than they can actively use. So they need to hire thugs, and those thugs become states, and those states, develop standing armies to protect private property. That's what it's all about. It's protecting private property in class and privilege. So these things matter. Well, let me see. You ask. Let's see how much time I have here. Can If you can defend your property, why is that not what you call private state? Let me just back up a second too. You say in anarchism you can't accumulate more than you can use, and then Liberty Server asks if you can defend your property, or is anarchism inherently a pacifist philosophy? Now, I've said this in comments to you, Liberty Server, and I'm sure you're a nice guy. But if you know so little about anarchism that you would ask if it is inherently pacifist philosophy, wouldn't it behoove you to maybe learn a little bit more? I mean, was Bakunin a pacifist? Was Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman, were they pacifists? Were the members of the CNT in Spain, were they pacifists as they valiantly fought Franco and the fascists? What would give you? I mean, there is a pacifist strand of anarchism, but has it been a major actor on the world stage? No. Were there pacifists in Seattle in 1999? Valiantly standing up to the police and the state and the power. No, come on. Learn a little bit about anarchism. Anarchists are socialists. All anarchists are socialists. Not all socialists are anarchists. That's an important distinction. Look, go back, read your anarchist history, bro. Anarchists are socialists up till Murray Rothbard. And you talked about secretly defining our terms. That's essentially what Rothbard did. He pretends that his private defense agencies aren't states. He pretends that anarchism and capitalism go together, when every anarchist prior to him fought against capitalism. It would behoove you to become more familiar with these things. You know, so I'm going to leave it at that. And I got like 9 minutes here. I've talked way too much. But those are my 2 cents. And hope you guys all have a good night. Peace.